Shazrin, founding member of MAPAN.
Malaysia is a country of immense natural beauty and resources, but with rapid economic growth and development, the need to protect our environment has become more urgent than ever. That's where MAPAN, the Malaysian Association of Public Advocacy for Nature, comes in. MAPAN is dedicated to helping MSMEs adopt environmental, social and governance or ESG practices through bottom-up training, capacity building and disclosure reporting. In addition, MAPAN is working to contribute towards the unification of ESG compliance mechanism, including a Malaysian ESG standard that benefits 97% of business establishments in Malaysia. Through private-public partnerships, MAPAN is helping to fast-track the embrace of ESG practices for smaller enterprises for a better, more suitable future for Malaysia. Join MAPAN in our mission to promote a sustainable future for Malaysia. Contact us today to find out how you can get involved.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Evening Chat with MAPAN. Today, I'm streaming live for you from Suvarnabhumi Airport, Bangkok, Thailand. And today, we don't have Sufidi. We have another founding member of MAPAN, who's also the Vice President of MAPAN, joining me as co-host, Emily Koch. So, Emily comes from a diverse background of venture capital, private equity, management, and entrepreneurship. She has co-founded several businesses and more than 25 years in direct investments. A significant part of that with 3i Groups Private Limited as a VP for the Asia Pacific region. Her portfolio ranged from the new technology to brick and mortar across consumer and commercial verticals. Emily sits on the board of several companies, working with management on business strategy and the execution of business plans. With the experience of founding and managing her own companies, advising and coaching VC and PE investees, Emily has an extensive track record in leading business change and transformation, with technology as the core engine to pivot the business. With her experience in digital transformation, finance, and leading business change with technology as the core engine to pivot the business, Emily has served in various board committees, board audit, risk, investment, nomination, and remuneration committees. Emily holds a Master's of Enterprise Innovation from Swinburne University of Technology, Australia, and a Bachelor's of Science in Mathematical and Information Sciences from La Trobe University, Australia as well. She is a Chartered Global Management Accountant and a Certified Sustainability Reporting Specialist, which makes her a suitable person to co-host with me to talk about ESG. Let's get her to the stage. Hi, Emily.
Roger Shazrin, that was a very kind introduction. Thank you.
So as your first appearance, your premiere on Evening Chat with MAPAN, I'll let you introduce today's speaker.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Ben Ong. Ben is the founder and chairman of MAPAN, which stands for Malaysian Association of Public Advocacy for Nature. Ben's passion is in helping SMEs in their ESG journey as they transition to greener and cleaner operations. Ben is also a veteran in the field of logistics and supply chain. His 30 plus years domain expertise in SI, cold chain, halal compliance, environment management, while serving some of the biggest companies in Malaysia like 7-Eleven, Guinness, ExxonMobil, Shell, BASF, Carrefour, Macro, has made him a strong and credible voice in improving operational efficiencies to meet ESG goals and targets. So this evening, he will take us on an ESG voyage comprising of 8 steps. So without further ado, over to you, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Shazrin. Hi, Emily. Thank you very much for the kind words. Good evening, everybody. My topic today is basically how to make ESG something simplified. So as it is not that mind-boggling for whoever new to this sphere, and also provide some pathway, so as it can be taken on at a pace that is commensurate, to the organizations. So I would want to perhaps start with step one, so as later we have more time to dive into some of the details that the so-called audience, might have to ask. When I have Shazrin, step one, okay, what I have done is I have summarized into 8 steps, because Chinese believe 8 is a good number. Well, of course, this is not the hard and fast rule, and it doesn't mean that step one must be done the first round, or the so-called the initial move. It depends on the company, and later on you will realize, while you walk through the 8 steps, perhaps your company has already started some of the steps, and they can be actually avoided, and you can jump straight into the following steps. But in the sequence of the process of ESG compliance or adoption, the basic idea is to how to reduce carbon over time. Yeah. So in order to reduce carbon, then you must first have the footprint. You must know, let's say my company in a year emit, say, 1 ton or 10 ton or 100 ton. So that is a starting point. How to get to that data is basically tracing back to your audited accounts. So as at least you are not lost. Your yearly audited accounts records all the transactions in financial terms. So by tracing back to your financial accounts, you have expenses, maybe water, maybe electricity, maybe energy. So from there, you can actually identify which are the elements which is material to your particular business. And of course, there is a so-called conversion process. Accounting records capture the ringgit value. But behind the ringgit value, when you trace back to all the documents, for instance, you pay electricity bill monthly, you pay water bill monthly, you pay your diesel, not monthly, perhaps daily, depending on how many trucks you run. So all this, by using a conversion table, you can actually convert the amount of water in liter into carbon. So there are conversion tables for which Shazrin is an expert. So that's why the first step is always to start, going backwards to something that you can rely on, instead of you try, to work in the air, without having a reference. So that's step one.
So Ben, before I ask you a question, and maybe after that Emily will have some questions to pick your brain as well. Maybe just as a reminder to those viewing out there, feel free to put your questions up in the comments, and we will try to address them as we go along. So let's try to make this an interactive session. So Ben, at MAPAN, we always put our clients or the focus group to our activities as SMEs. So, counting carbons may be a daunting process to them at thoughts. So what would be your comments or advice for small and medium enterprises in Malaysia, even micro enterprises in Malaysia, to start their carbon accounting?
Okay, I think there are 3 important matters to be make known of first. Number 1 is MSME makes up a substantial portion of the business establishment in Malaysia, in the range of 97.4%. So what it literally means is the bigger organizations only takes up 2.6%. That's number 1. Number 2 is, for all the big organizations to be ESG compliant, they have 3 scopes to handle: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So these are the 3 classification of emission. Scope 1, the company, whatever that they do, whether it's provision of services or production of goods, they can manage and they can capture all the data emission basing on what I have explained in step 1. And step 2 basically are quite straightforward in the sense that it relates to energy usage. You know, energy would include any sort of power. If you use fuel oil, or you use LPG gas, or you use natural gas, other than electricity. Again, this is between the company's control. Literally means the compilation and analysis of the data are pretty simple. But when it comes to scope 3, that's where the problem is, because most larger companies outsource the non-core activities. So this is what is called outsource services. And outsource services involves extended supply chain, whereby you use A as a subcontractor, and A may use B as a subcontractor, and then A may again use C as a sub-vendor. So when the supply chain gets on longer, the collection of data become a problem. Because why? Let's say if I am the subcontractor 1, I do work for you. At the same time, I also do work for another company. So now, how much of a carbon attributed to you and how much of a carbon attributed to my another customer? That's where the complication comes in. So that's point number 2 to address. Point number 3 here is, apart from the fact that MSME is so-called having a lot of numbers, and then MSME become the key of ensuring that larger corporations can go ESG compliant easily. Third thing here is this: MSME denotes micro, medium, and small industries. So the micro industry actually accounted for about 78% of the total 97.4%. And where this micro enterprise come from? The gig economy. For instance, Grab. Grab use so many so-called riders, so many dispatchers. And Grab is a platform, and they do not own any of these so-called supply chain equipments or supply chain so-called vehicles. So they will have to capture from thousands and thousands of the so-called freelance operator. I can be a Grab service provider. When I'm free, I just go and take a delivery service, or I go and deliver food. Yeah. So this is where the importance of MSME in the whole scenario of the country wanting to achieve its nationally determined contribution of 45% of our GDP by 2030. And moving forward, by 2050, we are supposed to be having net zero. And if this group, of the millions of smaller operators are unable to so-called live up and provide the necessary carbon calculation, then the nation will be in trouble by the year 2030 or by 2050. And the bigger organization can also not move forward quickly in their decarbonization exercise. Thank you, Shazrin.
Emily, over to you.
Right. I'm going to ask a very basic question, Ben. Why is ESG important to SMEs? And why is ESG also challenging to SMEs?
Okay. It is important in the sense that if all the larger organizations, 2.6% of them, comply with ESG, and the so-called 97.4% are not able to provide the scope 3 emission to this larger organization, simply means all these MSME will go out of business tomorrow. Tomorrow, in the sense that, if let's say like now, all the PLC by this year, they would have to start getting all their paperwork in place. So it's a loss of business, to MSME. That is the important part of it. And secondly is the challenging part, because they are small. And for them, to establish, say, a sustainability committee, to do the work may be an issue, because they are hand to mouth. Not that they are poor, but simply because they are very lean, very agile. And, they are very so-called cost sensitive. So the challenge that we have here is how can we get maybe the 2.6% larger organization to develop a vendor program, to handhold this MSME one way. Of course, the government can play a role, by unifying the standard, for which SC is now doing. They're trying to come up with the National Sustainability Reporting Framework, which is going back, to incorporate GRI, incorporate SASB, incorporate TCFD. So the challenge are multifold, but as long as the private-public partnership goes well, I guess MSME is in good hand.
I think some of the confusion that the MSMEs are also facing is that one, a lot of them are not sure whether they need to get into this, because if you read the legal documents, it will show, or it will state that only public listed companies are required. So they are more or less looking into an overflow, if you will, or a trickle over a spill over kind of compliance required to them. And beyond that, as you mentioned, Ben, there's also a multitude of standards and requirements. Bursa is saying one thing, then Bursa has of course come up with its third reporting guideline, which actually outlines in very detail how the public listed companies should be doing the disclosures. And then at the same time, you would have the Securities Commission Simplified ESG Disclosure Guideline. And then, of course, recently the SME Corp, which I'm also involved, came up with the quick guide to SME ESG disclosures for SMEs. So I think this is one way good. And not to forget NITI's IESG, right, Emily? So I think this is one way good, and at the same time, maybe sort of a double-edged sword, where it can hurt you because they would be more confused rather than enlightened.
Yes, there's just too many of these standards floating around. Recently we also have our national ESG framework that was launched, with 4 pillars, right? And so for the SME who are struggling, and they're struggling not just with their ESG issues and ESG reporting, but they're also struggling with their business. So what comes first, for SMEs is a constant challenge of allocating resources. Not many of them have deep pockets, right, to allocate for ESG compliance and reporting. So Ben, for such companies, right, what do you propose, or how would you advise them to start on their ESG journey?
That takes us through to the following steps. Then I will outline as we move into step 2. For instance, we have a variety of standards. So it is important, especially for smaller companies, to first select a suitable global standard. Meaning to say, this standard must be something recognized by their customers, because importantly for ESG it is now a survival tool. They have to comply in order to continue to be in the business. So that's where the business imperative comes. But as long as the MSMEs follow, a suitable global ESG standard, I guess they are okay. Of course, later on we will also go into the following steps, to determine or define what is a suitable global ESG standards? When we know there are so many standards around. So I guess it is then timely for us to move into step 3. Then we can see a clear picture, of how the sequence actually goes, and then how we can bundle the jigsaw puzzle together. So step 3 actually talks about how to assemble a sustainability team. Because a company, however small, regardless of the size of staff, or forgetting about the turnover, they still have, internally divisions. Let's say they have the sales department, they have their marketing department, they have their production, they have their HR, and they have also their quality control, and then many other departments. And this department may be one person, can be, doing more than one department. But the fact remains, that division of work and the roles are still being carried out. This is something which is important, and this is also something that can save money, because MSME must not be given the impression that they must set up, a completely new team, whereby they need to recruit, new staff. They have to pay higher salaries since it's a new knowledge. But actually, all this knowledge are between the business itself, because without this knowledge, whatever business would have gone out of the way long time. So the business do not live to apply ESG. ESG is simply a tool, to make the business more resilient, and then making the business more competitive. And when we say competitive, then we have to interpret this competitive in such a way, whatever that they do along the process of ESG practice, cost must come down. And cost come down is quite logical, because when you cut carbon, you actually reduce costs. If, let's say, your truck, instead of going out each time, only drop 5 places, now you drop 10 places. So the carbon is the same, but the revenue would have increased. So that is basically cost reduction. And let's say your same driver is doing 10 multiple drops instead of 5. Productivity increase. And the same time, for the same example that we use, basically the company has grown, is market rich. Last time, the same truck, the same driver goes 5 places. Now go 10 places. So in that sense, you make it so simple that, you can see where the cost has gone down, where the productivity has moved up, and where you can service more customers and reach out to a bigger market space. And these are the people that you already have in your business. So you assemble these people to form your ESG team. Do not think about having to spend time and recruit new people, because the new staff don't know your business. Because at the end of the day, ESG, whatever you do, it is still about your business, not about the knowledge. Because in business, you are down on earth, and you want to make very sure that your input, create more outputs that is possible. And that's also where, when business so-called adopt ESG, it is a strategic process whereby the company actually rethink of why the company exists, and you go back to your vision, you go back to your mission, and you also go back to your core values. So all this become a review opportunity for the company to really, review. The company could have been in existence for many years. So ESG become a good tool, for the company to really dissect, and look at what future holds for the company, because the company does not exist simply because of the boss. They got staff, they got customers, they got suppliers. They have many other stakeholders, they are bankers, they are insurers, So many other people come in place. It could be even including the community itself. Thank you.
So Ben, maybe just very shortly, since we mentioned that there's this guideline, that guideline for SMEs, where should they start, right? And then how can MAPAN help? Maybe just a little bit of internal marketing like that.
Okay, maybe we should move into step 4. So as over the short time that we have, we can cover all 8 steps, and then we can so-called brainstorm, as a group together with the audience, so it bring more values, to the audience. So if you look at step 4, in aligning the business to the adoption of ESG practices. Let's say if I'm in transport industry, then the standard that I need to pick must be something to do with transport. It could be a transportation, it could be warehousing, or it could be freight forwarding. So I first must identify, my industry vertical, because different industry has got different matrices. Like for instance, if you take SASB, which is one of the very good global standard, and one found, to be very convenient, for smaller setup. Because in this SASB, they got 77 verticals. So if you are in beverage, you go and look for the beverage. If you are in construction, you go for check the construction. If you are in the hoteling, you check the hoteling. So once you have identified the industry vertical that you have, in that particular standard, there are 3 parts. That's why SASB becomes something very helpful for smaller organizations, because it first tells you in your particular sector of business, what are the material area. Let's say like you are in transport, your material area is your diesel usage. Until one day when we have EV, then it become maybe renewable energy or fossil fuel. Yeah. So it identify for you the material area. Second is it comes up to tell you how many matrices you must follow for your industry vertical in terms of activity matrices. And these activity matrices cover E portion, S portion, and G portion. And then they have accounting metrics. Accounting metrics are where you calculate your carbon. So you have a very good guide, whereby you can match all these materiality issue, your accounting matrices, your activity matrices, to your company's vision, mission, and your quality objectives. So as when you run ESG, you really see, that it benefits your business. And you are not going into an academic exercise, of trying to be trendy, and trying to tell the world that you are ESG compliant. So this is where also, the problem or the issues of greenwashing can be properly tackled. So the company will do something which is really helpful to them in the long term, to grow the company, to be able to pay higher wage, to their employees, regardless of the numbers, and also to bring up the skill level of their staff. Because if you do bigger business by having ESG practices embedded, but your staff number remain unchanged, so your fixed cost remain unchanged, but your sales turnover increase. That is how MSME or all businesses should be looking at implementation of ESG.
Ben, so often I hear SMEs telling me, yeah, we understand, right, why we need to be on this journey, why we need to transition, and especially with all the things that are happening in Europe, Europe being the toughest in terms of regulation and expectations. So even if an SME is not incorporated in Europe or doesn't have a European presence, but the fact is that they sell to the European market, right? They need to show that they are ESG compliant. Ben, can you walk us through, right, that in partnering with customers and in partnering with suppliers, what would these companies, these MSMEs, need to look out for?
Okay, I think the MSME, as I explained earlier, they are big in numbers, and then they hold the scope 3 emission, which complete the ESG cycle of a bigger setup, and then they also form a majority of the gig industry, which is something very common in the modern lifestyle. So for that matter, it is almost impossible for MSME, to be out of the ESG system, simply because no businesses done without a bank, and no businesses, as I know of, do not cover insurance. And Bank Negara actually have a directive that all banks has to follow green practices or sustainability activities, which in simple terms means ESG. So for the MSME, it is almost like you have no way out, although it's voluntary now. There is no law yet. And you just imagine if one day the bank's own insurance company come in to tell you and say, hey, I think we cannot cover you because it is too risky, for us. And then you cannot show us your sustainability roadmap. Yeah. And for us, we have to report upwards, because you are our customer, you form our supply chain, so-called carbon, so you have to give me some figures, for me to tell my bankers parent. So the bankers would have to report to Bank Negara, because the banks, though lesser in numbers compared to MSME establishment, but they hold the big carbon portfolio. So by understanding, they are understanding the impact of banking and the impact of insurance, then I guess that will give a very clear direction to MSME, that, like it or not, as long as I'm in the business, as long as I carry on, doing whatever that I'm good at, I would have to embrace ESG one way or the other. So the question now is how to make it easier and how to make it more cost effective.
Yeah, Ben, talking about it from the banking perspective, banks are eventually, it's just round the corner where they have to start reporting on what is called finance emissions, which means the emission coming from their portfolio. And that will flow down, right, to their customers in terms of costing. There will be different rates, I believe. A time will come, there'll be different rates for different products. If SMEs cannot demonstrate that they are transitioning to greener operations. Yeah, that's a very good point, Ben, about the banking side.
So Ben and Emily, we're about halfway through, 34 minutes into our conversation. Hardly feels like it. For our audience out there, keep those comments coming in. We will be addressing your comments as we go along. I'm keen to know what step 5 is, Ben.
Yeah, please proceed. Okay, this is the most difficult part. The most difficult part in the entire sustainability, so-called the legwork. Compiling your carbon data, of course, you can draw from your accounting records, most of them, and then do a conversion, even by using Excel spreadsheet. You can actually gather, and from there you can establish and say in 1 year, my carbon footprint is say 10 metric ton. And for next year, I want to reduce 10%. So by 2025, I will have 9 metric ton. And that 1 metric ton reduction, I can then go back to this spread, of items that I collected my 10 metric tons data. So out of that 10 metric ton, assuming for easy calculation purposes, I have 10 different pockets, maybe my water, 1 metric ton, my electricity, 1 metric ton, and my staff, 1 metric ton, and my lorry, 1 metric ton, my warehouse, another metric ton, and then my office, 1 more metric ton, so forth. By identifying or by narrowing down, to all the pockets or compartments where your carbon come from, then your baseline is 10 metric ton. And in order to reduce 1 metric ton, which is 10%, then you again go back to the same data, and see, okay, maybe water, I can reduce 10%. Electricity, I think I can reduce 20%. Because now, aircon always put at 20. I can put it to 25. Yeah. And then I can off the aircon 1 hour before everybody goes home. And maybe I can look at improving in my aircon system. Yeah. So by so doing, actually you go back to break down, all the individual items. Then now you know very clearly where you go. Otherwise, the compilation of your carbon data will kill you. Because you'll be thinking, how am I going to know how much of a carbon I produce yearly? And then how am I going to commit how many percent to reduce? And if I commit, I plug a figure from the sky and say, everybody is talking about, 10%. Maybe I do 8%, Not too bad. No need to be very good, 8%. But then 8%, where? Because once you commit in your sustainability plan, then you have to show next year you actually reduce 8%. So this is where a little bit of accounting background actually helps you. Because in accounting, you normally break bigger things down in smaller pieces. And then you combine them again later. That's what consolidation or line by line additions come to. So I guess as long as the MSME are able, to go to this simple way of trace and track, because you do business, you have the accounts with you, you have your accounts clerk or accounts executive with you, you have your salespeople with you, you know who you sell to, who your customers, so by going backwards, to trace all these fabrics of your business, you basically are in the ESG proper already. Nothing difficult, in terms of data collection, if you are able, to really so-called zero in on how and what makes up your total business.
So coincidentally, developing carbon inventories is my bread and butter. I do this every day, Ben, and I have to tell you, nobody has died from doing it before. So it's not going to kill them, not literally, but perhaps if you don't approach it correctly, it's going to be very resource intensive, and it can be very confusing, and you may get results that are not representative, especially if you're using wrong references to carbon emissions and emission factors and things like that. So I guess for SMEs, it can be a daunting journey and a very daunting and intimidating journey at the start. But as you go along, I think this becomes easier after you've identified where and what kind of data you're supposed to be collecting and things like that. And I think, Emily, it's also worth mentioning, right, that some of them, they are under the impression, because they live in the end of the pipe era for so long. They are saying, we comply with all the regulations of Department of Environment. Why should we be looking into GHG? What are your thoughts on that, Emily?
Yeah, Shazrin and Ben. The comment I hear the most is, we have insufficient in-house expertise to do all this, right? And on top of the EIA and all sorts of other standards and compliances that we have as a business. What, you want us to do this additional stuff, right? We are already facing challenges with cybersecurity, with our marketing, and all sorts of other issues. So that there's still a lot of hesitancy because right now it is not yet mandatory. So you can expect businesses to, SMEs, which are already very stretched by nature, you would expect them to try to push this as far back as possible. But I would say you shouldn't use insufficient in-house expertise, right, as an excuse. Because Ben, I really like what you're saying. You examine your own in-house operational efficiencies, right? From that angle, you should be doing that as a business anyway, always examining your own efficiency and your own productivity. So from there, you already start your ESG journey. Yeah, so that's a very good point coming from Ben.
Uh, very much so. As I mentioned, the business do not live on ESG. ESG is just another strategic tool to assist the business to be future proof, to be future ready, because this ESG wave, or sustainability movement is going to be stronger by days. So the earlier the MSME are ready, the better they are hedged, against the future risk of losing business to someone, who are more creative and someone who are more so-called adaptable, and someone who want to take ESG as if an ISO. Today, you simply can't supply or you simply can't service any reputable companies or organizations if you do not have an ISO. So I see the day of ISO like, the day of ESG. When ISO first implemented, everyone goes through the same complication and having the same so-called concern, as to I'm already very tight, don't tell me to do more things that I should, but after that so-called initial teething, people start to see, oh yes, I think ISO helped me, to organize, my job systematically, and then it reduces, the risk of accidents, and it also, improve the safety of my people, and then it also, kind of do away, for with the damage to my machineries, all to my production line, and lesser downtime. So all these are brought about by the ISO. And of course, ISO has got many different ISO standards, just like in ESG, we have so many global standards. So to me, I feel if you look at it broadly, this is a transition. As we say, energy transition, ESG adoption is also a transition, and people needs to transform, they need to change their mindset, and it takes time. Along the way, if the government, if the so-called bigger setup, or if the banks, like banks are doing, so many facilitating or enabling exercises, all this help.
Yeah, Ben, I just want to say also that we fail to see this as actually change management within companies. Yeah, we are falling into that rabbit hole of looking at ESG as a separate issue. But in fact, ESG should be integrated, right, with the entire business strategy. So, for example, you're looking for land to expand, right? And there's a cheap piece of land in a low-lying area, and you think, okay, I should take advantage of that. Just giving a very simplistic example. But the banks or your funding partners, they will be looking at what sort of adaptive strategy and mitigation strategy that you have in place, right? So, for example, having facilities in a low-lying area, the bank would conduct their own ESG due diligence. They would conduct their own due diligence, right? And they would say, hey, you know, this is not a good idea. If you want us to finance this, we probably will have to impose a higher cost, a higher interest rate, because of whatever additional risks that they have assessed your business to be in. Right. So integration of ESG into the entire business operations, corporate planning, risk management, right, supply issues, um, and all this needs to take place. That would how I would tell companies, big or small, to look at it, that it is not a separate thing.
So Ben, we have another 12 minutes or so before we have to end our session. So why don't you take us through the next 3 steps?
Okay. Okay, step number 6. Again, as I open this discussion or conversation by saying that the steps are not meant to be rigid. It can vary according to the company's so-called stage of ESG so-called practices. So step number 6 is when you want to start something new, yes, you can make it simple. But the simplest thing out of common sense is you talk to your customer or talk to your supplier. Because anyway, when you do business, you have two ends of the story. One is your customer, one is your supplier. If your customer is happy, your supplier is happy, you're happy. Because you're in between. So do not think of something very big, something which is out of reach. Apply a bit of so-called common sense into whatever that we wanted to do new. Because let's say if you service Nestle, sure enough, Nestle already got the standard that they are using, and then Nestle will probably also know if you supply labor, what are the HR or what are the human rights, or what are the lodging requirements, or what are the pay level, or what are the so-called housing, if you have foreign workers. So customer actually become your free consultant. They are your free consultant, and this is good because if they are happy, they give you more business. So there's no cost to you. Every benefit suppliers. You see, in supply chain, it is important that your suppliers are always with you, because you cannot fly. You will have to do a lot of things with the help of your suppliers. Maybe you have to buy maintenance service because you use forklift, yeah, and then you need to have your IT support outsource contractor because you use a warehouse management system. So if your relationship are good with the suppliers, and suppliers being suppliers, you are their customers. So if you tell them what you need and what Nestle asks you to comply, you convey to them, and then they will make it happen for you. So this is where I guess finding the ESG partner is important. And that's also one of the reasons why MAPAN has been stressing, that we must have a PPP, a public-private partnership, because government, don't forget, government is a very important stakeholders, because if one day our Companies Act is changed to say that, our national sustainability reporting framework is going to be the standard for Malaysian ESG reporting, then you would have to follow, because Companies Act is already there. Audited report is required. So it's a matter of they just changing or upgrading the law. ESG become a law already. So that's step 6. Can I have step 7? Okay. Emily mentioned about some of the guidelines that we have. I mean, these are the support given by the government or government agencies. Yeah. And we have like IESG from MITI, and we have SEDG from this CMM, Capital Market Malaysia, which is Security Commission's agency. And SME Corp has also come up with their ESG guidelines. So all these are useful in the sense that you can use them as your guidelines when you have issues. So they are like your dictionary. So before you go to consultant, you go to this thing first. If you still cannot resolve or you find no way, then only you check with consultant, because all these documents are free. You go to consultant, they charge you by time cost. Yeah, so in terms of cost efficiency, then you need to do your own planning. I'm not saying that you must not go to consultants, but you always do your filtering first. You do whatever that you can, you do whatever that is free, then only next going to pay money. And that's also what a business is for. Every business are thinking of how to, streamline, their cost structure, and then optimize their returns on the effort put in.
I think this one is also an important point, when that the perception that everyone has that everything will need money first. So having these guidelines that is produced by MITI, by Securities Commission, through Capital Market Commission, and SME Corp, but it's really looking into providing opportunities for SME to start on their own journey. Without, as you correctly say, Ben, without first talking to consultants. So Emily, we hold our thoughts for a moment, because let's let Ben finish his 8 steps first before we pick his brain for a minute or two.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, the step number 8. Okay, step number 8. MAPAN is an NGO. So we, of course, promote the idea that, especially MSME, they should work with NGO. And for MAPAN, we are not a pressure group. We are not an activist group. We basically want to just make sure that we can provide some kind of assistance along the way of the ESG journey, for smaller companies, to make ESG an easier job for all of them. That's why we come up with our ebook. Our ebook is basically a guidebook, which is even more detailed compared to all the guidelines that you have from the government. Because government, they look at the country as a whole. They cannot look at the micro level of a business. Our ebook is made basing on a business. That means we have gone down to the most so-called ground level. And that ebook, we hope, as time goes by, we can actually slip them into the so-called the job schedule of most MSME. Of course, it is again, an option, because different people will find different guidebooks, or different NGO of more help to them. As an NGO, we are looking at the so-called the whole landscape, being fluid, and we must always also keep ourselves up to date and current, and remaining relevant, to the industry, to play the roles of an NGO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for running through your 8 steps. Seeing that it's Chinese New Year, 8 is what, right? So yeah, maybe all what in the new year as we embark on our ESG journey, right? And all you folks who are in the heavy emitting industries, such as transportation infrastructure, and automobiles, come talk to MAPAN. And all of you in manufacturing. Manufacturing is one of the industries with the greatest impact on the environment, social, and governance. There are significant ESG concerns which threaten manufacturing's long-term viability and competitiveness. Come and talk to us at MAPAN. Right. We have about 5 minutes left to our hour. So over to you, Shazrin.
So my thoughts on the 8 steps. I think Ben, you've outlined it quite nicely, and I would not say that this is restricted to the MSMEs only. I think even emerging public listed companies can actually take up these steps as well. Not to engage with a consultant upright, and try to work with NGOs for a change, right? And then maybe we can work hand in hand in developing your ESG disclosures. So we're about 55 minutes in. I know Ben is not a 1 minute person, so I think this is my final thoughts for the day. I'll let Ben. Any final thoughts, maybe in 2 minutes?
Okay, I think there are only three repetition required. Number one being, although ESG is voluntary, it is inevitable for even MSME. That's point number one. Point number two is ESG must be treated, as a strategic tool, to grow the business further. So in that sense, it must be treated as a revenue center and not a cost center. Anyone who start ESG with cost center mentality, they have already gone into the wrong shape of things. Yeah. Number three is we must always look at future with a change in mind. Whatever happens today is going to change tomorrow. And ESG just provide us that leeway, for us to be ready, to be future proof, and also to be better than today. I guess that's the whole idea of sustainability. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Ben, for that final words. So Emily, since this is your premiere, I'll let you do the closing in 30 seconds.
Oh, wow, 30 seconds. Well, I should introduce our next session really in 30 seconds. Our next session is the Logistics of Plastic to Fuel Initiative by Tuan Haji Muhammad Faiz Hakim. Right. So that should be a very interesting topic as well. It's happening on the 6th of March, 2024. Right. So folks, stay tuned for that.
All right. So good night, everyone. I'll
Thank you.
see you in Kuala Lumpur. I'm about to board the plane right now. Very high carbon footprint. Good night, Emily and Ben. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yeah. Safe
Safe trip
journey
back.
home.
Bye bye.